7, the Abbasid decline and the spread of Islamic civilization to South and Southeast Asia. Alright, we'll open up with the spread of Islam. We've talked about this already with chapter 6. You have part of the Arabian Peninsula, and then you'll have, under the rules, starting to spread into other areas, the Sassanian Empire and part of the Byzantine in the north. And eventually they'll be conquering a larger area all the way up into Spain. Eventually the Abbasid will start to decline a little bit, and it will be this purple outline. So just a little bit smaller than what the Umayyad had. Alright, the Islamic heartlands in the middle and late Abbasid eras, Abbasid Empire started to weaken, and it's going to start a slow decline between the 9th and 13th centuries. One of these reasons you're going to have a lot of peasant revolts because of high taxes, and we'll start to get into some of those reasons as we look at it. Al-Mahdi will be your third Abbasid Caliph from 775 to 785, and he's going to have some things that he attempted to achieve and failed at, and because of that you're still going to have disunity and some issues within the Abbasid Empire. One of those being the Shia. The Shiite, he was not able to reconcile their differences and the struggles, and so therefore you're going to still have that Sunni Shiite split and the difficulties and revolts that come along with that. You'll also have the succession problem. Muhammad did not name a successor, and this problem continues on. Al-Mahdi even had such an issue, he even almost chose a son from a concubine. He couldn't choose which son he wanted, and therefore you have a huge succession problem that continues throughout the rest of the Abbasid Empire. Abandon the frugal ways. So your first two caliphs, we talked about this in chapter 6, were very frugal and they lived simple lives compared to the Umayyad. Now with Al-Mahdi, there's going to be a change, and he's going to move into luxury. He's going to build massive palaces and mosques, and with that, in order to build those things, you have to pay for it. Therefore, there's a tax burden that kind of goes up with the peasant revolts. Also, they're going to go from simple to luxury and materialism, and so you also have peasant revolts as well against those actions. Here are your major trade routes during this time period. We'll even get into the North Africa trade routes in the next chapter with chapter 8. You'll see your sea routes as well, and of course in this chapter we'll be getting into the contact with India as well. I'm just not editing that, sorry about that. Alright, imperial extravagance and succession disputes. Harun al-Rashid was the son of al-Mahdi, and he will take charge when his father dies, avoiding a major civil war. However, with his death will come a major civil war. This is the time period of the 1001 Nights. So you'll have your Arabic legends and tales. Not all of these, but some of these adopted in some of the Disney movies of Aladdin and things like that. He took the throne at age 23. Because he was so young, and of course you didn't know which son was going to end up taking the throne, he wasn't brought up fully in the courts and the administration, and so therefore he had to rely on advisors. The advisors he's going to rely on are going to be Persian, and from this point on you're going to have a lot of Persian influence. Remember we talked about chapter 6, they moved the capital. Well, also you have here, you have now Persian advisors. So from this point on, a lot of the caliphs are going to become pawns, and they will be ruled by the Persians that are in charge. With his death, as I said earlier, will follow a civil war, and Al-Mamun will come to power in 813 to 833. And this is going to be the beginning of your mercenary armies and your slave armies that occur. What ends up happening is a lot of these mothers are trying to protect their sons because there's no line of succession, and therefore they want to look out for them and keep them safe, but also get them to the most power possible. And so one of the things happens is these mercenary armies get hired to protect them. Well, they're mercenary armies and slave armies, and so therefore money speaks louder than anything, and therefore they can be bought. And in some cases, they see the opportunity themselves to come to power and overthrow that caliph and kill him and put one of their generals in charge. And again, going back to the pawns, because of these mercenary armies, a lot of these caliphs become subject to being pawns and not really getting their agenda across, but getting where the mercenary armies are as well. Imperial breakdown and agrarian disorder. You have civil unrest because the caliphs are building lavishly. And one of the problems with the decline is going to be agriculture. What ends up happening is the people that were taxed too much couldn't afford to pay them, and therefore they would go to the outskirts of the area where tax collectors wouldn't go after them. These were also people that were helping keep your irrigation systems built. Also, the tax money is going to these lavish palaces, and even multiple palaces, because each new ruler, because of the mercenary armies trying to assassinate them sometimes, they would want to rebuild a whole new palace because people already knew the secret passages in the old one, and so they needed to protect themselves by building a whole new one. So the taxes that were going towards irrigation systems are now going towards other things, and therefore your irrigation system starts to erode in areas and deteriorate, and more people will leave those areas, and eventually some areas are struggling for food and agriculture. The declining position of women in the family and society. Women are going to become more secluded. They'll be wearing the veil during this time period. Polygamy is going to pick up for males, so more just repressing women and secluding them. And then the harem. This is going to be a section of the palace. It's not like one room where they lock them up, what we talked about. This is more of a wing of the palace that they have, and the women will be secluded in this area, and then when the caliph or eventually the sultan wants them, he will call upon that person. But that's where the women will be secluded. Nomadic incursions in the eclipse of the caliph power. Former provinces threatened the Abbasids. So the Buyids of Persia and the Seljuk Turks are going to be areas that are threatening their rule. Eventually they'll come into power, and this will still be the Abbasid Empire, but it's going to be ruled by the Persian Buyids and then of course by the Turks. Under the Buyids, that's where you're going to get the term sultan from, and it means victorious in Arabic. The Seljuk Turks will come in as well. They are going to be Sunni, and they are going to purge the Shia. They're going to try and repress them and get rid of them even more. Eventually, the Seljuk Turks are the ones with the Byzantine Empire that are going to defeat the Byzantines, and they will also reconquer Egypt that had started to revolt, and now they will control most of Asia Minor. Asia Minor, the northern region up here, this is Turkey right here, present-day Turkey. Actually, Turkey comes up in here a little bit too. But that is present-day Turkey that you have. All right, the impact of the Christian Crusades, 1096, Western European Christian Knights established small kingdoms. Eventually, they will lose these kingdoms to Saladin, who retakes the lands, and he takes the last one in 1291. But the biggest thing to understand is this: is that the Christians receive more than the Islamic culture receives from the Christians. And what I mean by that is the European knights were able to take back Greek learning from the classical age. They were able to take back weaponry and strategies for the military, and they were also able to have a greater merchant contact now, and trade is going to increase. We'll start reading in chapter 9, and then later on in this chapter we're really going to see the advancement that Europe makes, and a lot of this can be contributed to trade and some of the Greek learning that they get. Alright, here's the expansion of Islam at this time. This is not the Abbasid Empire, this is the expansion of Islam into North Africa, which we'll study in the next chapter, even getting up into bordering into upper parts of Russia, and starting to get into India as well, which we'll talk about next. These are the travel routes of the Crusades. These are the first 3 Crusades. We'll actually study 1, 2, 3, and 4 later on in a couple chapters. All right, an age of learning and artistic refinements. Despite the political struggles, and even to a degree some of the economic struggles that they have with taxes and agriculture, merchants are going to thrive during this time period, and so are the arts. You're going to get Persian as the court language for the administration, and you're going to get Arabic and religion, law, and sciences. We'll have a few people that develop some of the more famous writings during this time period. We'll also get advancements in math and science and astronomy and medicine. Some of this coming from India, but eventually infusing into the Islamic culture, especially your Arabic numerals, which were really from India. You'll have experiments in chemistry. You'll get the classification of animals, vegetables, and minerals. You'll get specific weights. Some of the constellations that were named during this time period in the Middle East, we still use the same name to this day for these areas. The medicines, this is one of the most advanced areas in the world at this time for medicine. Kings and monarchs in Europe, people from Asia would come to the Middle East to be cured by some of these doctors. They had a formal examination where they had to be tested. They had courses of study. And so your medicine was highly advanced in this area. Maps as well is going to be another innovation. Your maps from this area are going to be highly sought after because of their great detail. All right, religious trends and the new push for expansion. All right, Sufis are going to be part of your expansion. Merchants and Sufis are going to help bring Islam to a lot of these areas. While the military is going to expand to a degree into India, it's really going to be your Sufis and merchants who actually start converting people. You're going to have the Sufis versus the Ummah. The Ummah are more conservative and they're against major outside influence. Your Sufis were more about the personal union with Allah. Your Ummah more conservative, like a legalistic point of view. They rejected the Greek philosophies, and Al-Ghanzili, sorry for the pronunciation, is going to try and fuse the Greek and Quranic ideas, but he's going to be opposed by those Orthodox scholars from the Ummah. New waves of nomadic invasion and the end of the Caliph. The Mongols are going to start coming in. Genghis Khan's going to reach this area and then he's going to die. They're going to go back and bury him and have their ceremonies, and we'll learn about this in a couple chapters from now. And then his grandson is going to come in, and Baghdad will eventually fall in 1258 when the last Abbasid ruler is killed. All right, the coming of Islam to South Asia. By 1200, Muslims ruled much of North and Central India. We're going to have two major conflicts, obviously the religion itself, and then egalitarianism versus the caste system will be our other major difference. Here's the expansion that we're looking at, your trade routes into Southeast Asia and into Asia that are going to aid in this. Political divisions in the first Muslim invasion. The first Muslim invasion is going to do with revenge. In 711, the beginning of the 8th century, you're going to have revenge taken for pirate raids on merchant ships. And so Muhammad ibn Kazim is going to take the Sind area, which was the Indus Valley region, and he's going to conquer it. Now this is going to be under the Umayyad, and eventually he's going to be pulled back to help with some issues eternally. And the next wave will be under the Abbasids during this time period. But again, we have another comparison here. The group invading is going to be impacted more than the people that are actually invading themselves. So Islam is going to receive math, medicine, music, astronomy. So they're majorly going to be influenced by the Indian culture, whereas the Indian culture wasn't as influenced as much by the Arabs. Here's the Sind area, the Indus River Valley region. All right, the coming of Islam to South Asia. The second wave of Muslim invasion is for money. It's for the booty. They hear about these lavish palaces and the wealth that a lot of these areas have in India. And so they're wanting to go in and invade for money. Remember, they were taxing people heavily. They thought, well, we could use invasion and take the money that way. So again, it's going to be really the Sufis and the merchants who convert people, not because they come in there with the military. Muhammad of Gur is going to come in, and he was under the Persians at that time. And he's going to go into the Indus River Valley again, and he's going to expand all the way to the Bengal area. His lieutenant is going to actually form the Delhi Sultanate, and they're going to rule the northern region for about 300 years. So the other comparison that we've talked about is the Christians come in to the Islamic regions, but they really don't hold those regions, and eventually Islam takes them back. In this case, your Delhi Sultanate is going to continue to rule for about 300 years, so a lengthy amount of time. Patterns of conversion. Even though there's a large number of conversions, the percentage is actually small. Even back then, India had a high population, and most of the people that converted were either Buddhists or of the lower caste system, so you're untouchables. You also have some conversions in this area from people fleeing the Mongols and also wanting to avoid the heavy taxes that were imposed upon them. There's a few maps that are worth looking at to explain some of the areas of travel and merchants and expansion. Patterns of accommodation. Your high caste Hindus are going to remain apart, so you're going to have a major segregated area where you're going to have communities of your Brahmins, warriors, and governors, and then your Islamic upper class that are ruling these areas. The Bhakti are devotional cults or emotional approach, caste distinction dissolved. They are going to focus more on the emotion. They're going to focus more on Shiva, Vishnu, and Kali. And they're going to dissolve some of the distinctions. Remember we talked about the 300 subcastes within the caste system? Some of those start to blend together and start to merge to aid in people not converting. You're also going to get songs and poems and writings in regional languages. So that aids them as well, because now more people are able to understand and read more about these and hear about these songs. You'll have your Brahmins versus the Ummah, and again, your separate communities with that. All right, the spread of Islam to Southeast Asia. This is going to be mostly through trading contacts and conversions. You're not going to have a massive wave of military force coming in to take these areas. Sorry for the pronunciation, but Shiravijaya was the kingdom in Southeast Asia that's going to collapse. It opens up the opportunity for a lot of other trading companies to come in and merchants to come in from outside, and Islam comes in. A lot of the people in this area had converted to Buddhism, but that was only in the upper class. So that was most of your elites at this time. So Islam is going to convert, your Sufis and merchants are going to convert more of your lower classes and work their way up because they're the majority of the population. And that's how Islam is going to spread in Southeast Asia. They're going to go into the port cities, and that will be one of the more important things and how they're converting. You also need to remember that women in this area are going to keep more of their rights. They're going to keep their jobs down in the port cities with merchants. They're not going to wear veils in this area. They're going to keep a lot of their traditions. So a little bit more similar to the next chapter in chapter 8 that you will be reading about, with women keeping a lot of their rights. Again with the trade systems. And we will conclude with several maps to aid you in understanding that.